Hi guys, I'm really sorry that I can't be in your lesson today. So all the slides and everything you need are on our classroom, but I just thought I'd try and talk you through the lesson as well. And if you want to stop me at any time, you can obviously just press pause. Okay, so these are the key terms for today. So we are having our own little go at being farmers today, which if I was there with you, I'd be very excited about because, as you know, I want to quit my job and be a farmer. So these are the key terms that you'll need to do your definitions for today, please. So just to start with then, we need to consider the difference between an open system and a closed system. And you will have covered this term and idea when you've done the drainage basin. So think about how you can transfer your ideas across from your physical geography to your human geography. What is an open system and why do we think that farming is an open system? So try and apply that concept. Can you please write a few sentences to summarise your discussions in your notes? Okay. So this is the whole concept of farming as a complete system, and it identifies inputs, processes, outputs, losses, and hazards. Don't spend too long on this slide because this is actually the set of answers. But what I want you to do is use the link there to the template on our Google Classroom and have a go at categorizing the different ideas that are listed here and put them into the different categories. So again, these are a set of answers. So don't do any cheating, please. So if you're looking at this and you're cheating, quick, stop me talking, turn this slide off. You can see though, when you're ready to check this, that the inputs have been classified into physical, cultural, and economic. And then processes are orange, greens are outputs, and purples are losses, light red or pink is hazards. Okay, so you should be able then to identify which aspects go into which part of the system for farming. So what we need to do is then put those under the different headings. So use that template to do that. So the reason we're doing it is because we need to identify and understand exactly what are inputs, processes, outputs, losses, and hazards in a farming system. And that will help us understand the system as a whole, and it will help us to answer a series of questions on this too. Okay, so if you can crack on with that for me, please. So there are different types of farming, which you may well be aware of. So you can see here there's commercial, subsistence, intensive, extensive, arable, livestock, and mixed. And you need to make sure that you know what they all mean. So there is a PDF on the Google Classroom and a Google Doc, and that actually will give you the answers to that. You may well know some of these already. It depends how rural you guys are, I suppose, and how much you have to do with farming generally. But it's important that we have the definition. So commercial farming is very different to subsistence. Again, subsistence farming is a concept you may well be familiar with from GCSE when you were looking at those ideas around development. So can you please get definitions of these terms into your notes? Again, feel free to use the Google Doc to support you with that if you need it. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is get yourselves into 5 groups, and I'd like you to do the definition, which hopefully you've already done, but then I'd like you to look at what's actually involved in commercial farming, subsistence, intensive, capital, intensive labour, and then extensive farming. And I'd like you to do an example of each as well. Okay, so see what you can do in terms of using the PDF attachment on the classroom. You've obviously got the definitions already, and you can do a Google search as well. If you're really stuck on this, I can be around and online during the lesson, so I'll leave my window open, and if you have got any questions, then do a comment or a chat, and will be able to come back to you during the lesson. Okay, so something you need to consider now then is with your example that you've been looking at, how productive is that type of farming? All right. And use these little images as prompts to get you thinking about productivity. Okay. Now, for me, there's a real moral dilemma here around productivity of farming and also animal welfare. So if you're looking at some of the super farming, for example, in the US, productivity is going to be exceptionally high, but that brings about a whole different set of questions around animal welfare, particularly when we look at dairy farming. And that actually is true of the UK as well. So by all means, consider looking at some stretch and challenge wider reading articles around this. And I will give you a list of those of places to go to. Okay, so agricultural productivity is typically measured in terms of yield, all right? So you should have been looking at how productive your farm is, but the way in which you actually sort of calculate that is how many kilograms of grain per hectare or kilograms of meat per animal or litres of milk per cow, etc. And that gives us a total factor productivity. TFP. And remember, that was one of our key terms. So it's an official thing, and that's how we measure productivity of different types of farming. So there are different ways then to obviously improve that productivity. And I think this is where our sort of moral dilemmas come in. Farmers need higher yields because it's their source of income. It's also making farming more efficient for farmers and the populations. And there is also some real positives with regards to reducing impact on the environment if we increase sort of efficiency and productivity as well. But there are definitely the downsides. So consider the following questions, please, and answer these in your notes. So how does higher yielding, disease-resistant and drought-resistant varieties of crops or seeds affect the TFP? So in certain areas of the world, drought-resistant crops are essential because other things simply won't grow. There's no moral dilemma attached to that. That's just simply being smart. And I talked to you last lesson about farmers in the UK having what we call agronomists, and agronomists will go out to a farmer's land and assess the pH balance of the soil and the moisture content and say, you really ought to be growing crop X on this field instead of crop Y, and that will increase your productivity, increase your yield, and therefore your income. So the next question, do more efficient and timely cultivation and harvesting practices, do they improve TFP? And if so, how? And lastly, and this is definitely one that might get you debating, and feel free to do that, is breeding animals for favourable genetic qualities and behaviour, does that improve TFP as well? So I've got some good real life examples around that for you, and I'll share those with you on a doc. Okay, so if you can answer those in your notes, that'd be terrific. Okay, so there is a Google Doc with these graphs on, and again, it's really similar style question to the things we've been looking at so far when we're looking at graphs. So forgive me for redoing this skill again, but it's a really important one. So being able to look at a series of data and analyse the trends shown. So look across then here at global growth, low income countries and high income countries. Use the key down here, okay, and then answer that question, okay. So it says using your graph sheet, that's the one that's on the Google Classroom. All right, and you can just simply type on your doc underneath. Something to consider when we're looking at this type of graph. So it's a compound bar graph, which means that all the data is stacked on top of itself. So we have a total figure here if we look at all the data stacked on top of it, but we can look at individual factors within the data by looking at the color coding. So when you're looking at data like this, try and look for what is the overall trend or overall picture. And then try and give specific data to support what you're saying. And then what are the anomalies? Okay, is there any data that doesn't fit the pattern? And the question here is analyze. So that is trying to give reasons why. Obviously, if it was describe, we wouldn't be doing any of that. We'd just be saying what we see. But the key word here is analysing. Okay.